Well, you knew this had to happen. First, sorry about the delay from videos, yada yada, life sucks. I'm back to doing at least this video for a while because my most popular video is my reaction to the Power Rangers trailer. So, what did I think of the movie? I had the biggest, stupidest grin on my face throughout most of this movie because I loved it so much. Caveat is it that great of a movie? I think it's an okay movie. I think it's a good movie. I think there's some things they could have done a lot better, but I really enjoyed a lot of this movie. Some things didn't work, and I'll get to that in a second, but here's what works the most for this movie. The Ranger characters are awesome. They really are. These young actors are really throwing all they got into making these characters well-rounded and believable. You feel for these characters. You identify with these characters. Maybe not with everything they're doing, but they're definitely more realistic than the original characters. I think, these aren't the original characters. For most of these characters, Billy is the only one that is sort of similar to his TV show counterpart, because he's a nerd. But they changed enough about him to make him his own thing, and the actor portraying him, Billy's going to be the show stealer. People are going to talk about this character for ages. Not just because of, the thing that they reveal about him, but just because an amazing actor doing an amazing job. Props to you, man. You're the best. But everybody else in this movie gets everything right with their characters and how their characters journey from point A to point B in this movie. That's what sold me on the movie. Like, there were times I forgot I was watching a Power Rangers movie and there was an alien coming to destroy everything, just because I was just enamored with how these characters interacted with each other and, how their personalities bounced off and just how really cool I'd like to be friends with them. And that's the big thing about this movie. Like I said, there were times that I forgot that this was a Power Ranger movie because the big Power Ranger scene is the entire third act. The last 45 minutes to the hour of the movie, that's where all the Power Ranger stuff is. People might feel ripped off about that, but I feel the build-up was, they had like an unmorphed fight. There's a training montage and then they have an unmorphed fight against an enemy. It doesn't go over well, but unmorphed fights were part of Power Rangers. For a Day of the Dumpster remake, it kind of follows that sort of logic. They get told about these powers, they falter on the deal, and they get fought by monsters when they don't morph, and then at the end of the episode they morph and get their Zords and kick some butt. So if you wanted to remake Day of the Dumpster but stretch it out to about 2 hours, there you go. This movie kind of nails it. But let's not say that this movie is perfect. Let's not say this franchise is perfect. Power Rangers has flaws just by its own existence. Even my favorite seasons like Time Force and SPD and RPM, they have their flaws too. Nothing's perfect. Not even The Avengers. I'm rambling, but just point out that this movie sort of falters on things like product placement. Whoever owns Krispy Kreme had to have put up at least 40% of the money to fund this movie, because the product placement of Krispy Kreme is so globulous and just, it's part of the freaking plot, and I don't want to spoil anything yet for people who still haven't seen this movie, but I've seen people mock, just on the YouTube thumbnails, the Krispy Kreme product placement in here. And while it's awkward and silly and corny, isn't Power Rangers supposed to be awkward, silly, and corny? Like, even when it has heart, it's still allowed to be cheesy. Even though I'm enjoying the Boom comic books, that's something I think they missed. Like, the Power Rangers fan film-ish thing kind of missed that in order to... Well, that whole thing just exists to make a point about, crappy reboots. But luckily, this reboot, I felt more or less nailed it. Now, your major caveat, people watching this, is probably going to be the fact that a lot of the action happens at the very end. And if you don't like these characters, you're not going to like this movie, because this movie is all about these 5 characters growing and coming together to learn how to be superheroes. Some sort of seasons of Power Rangers start like that, like SPD, where these people don't like each other, but then they're given the powers and they have to work together throughout the course of the season to come together. But here, their morphing depends on them coming together as people. Hi, Iggy. My cat just walked in. So, that's the meat and potatoes of this movie. These characters interacting and learning how to become heroes. But let me talk about some other things I really like. This movie starts with fan service and ends with fan service. Let me tell you, this movie knows how to filendle the grendels of the fans of this piece of media. Like, there's fan service mentions of certain places and things, and the big fan service that starts at the beginning. Fans definitely worked on this movie. That's all I'm saying. Rita Repulsa's character. Elizabeth Banks is the only one really hamming it up in her performance as Rita Repulsa. And while some people said that was a bit, distracting since everybody else is playing this thing super seriously, it kind of works for Rita Repulsa. As a villain, she was effective. Now, a lot of people are mad that Goldar is just a big blob of gold goo. Yeah, that's a point against this movie. While Goldar didn't have the most dynamic personality in all of villain history, he had a personality at least. Turning him into a big glob of gold goo to be the basically glorified monster of the week when he had an arc with Tommy in the original series, that feels like a bit of a disservice. And in a movie that's blooming with fan service, to really miss that, what were you thinking? Let me talk about Zordon and Alpha. I really liked what they did with Zordon. Now, not a lot of time is focused on Zordon, probably because they couldn't afford Bryan. Wow! Probably because they couldn't afford Bryan Cranston all that much. So, the parts with Zordon are kind of minute. I think altogether he has around 20 minutes of screen/voice time. If you add it up all together, 20, maybe 30 minutes, if rounding up. But they actually give him a little bit more character than they do in the show. I mean, in the show, he's a wise, kind sage, always there to give advice to the Rangers, to tell them how to beat certain enemies. He's kind of that here, but there's a little bit more to him. It isn't explored that deep, but he does have a character growth moment, and it's surprising to say that about Zordon, who's usually so altruistic and a force for good. See him have a little bit of a flaw in him, that's kind of refreshing. Alpha 5, Bill Hader's Alpha 5 is a snarky little dink. There's some Alpha-y moments to him, but he's a little bit more snarky and sarcastic this time around. But the energy that the character had in the original show is there. And even though not a lot of people really liked how he looked with his gray-like distended belly and his huge arms, it works on screen. It really does. And again, the aesthetics of the suits, of the Zords, of the Megazord, of the command center, and of how Zordon's no longer a head in a tube, he's a head in a pinwall. If you don't like that aesthetic, personally, I didn't mind it, and I thought it looked really good on the big screen. But if you hate the way the suits looked, if you hate the way the Zords looked, you're not going to like them in the movie, I'm sorry. Just like how in the original series, Angel Grove was a really big city because they kept cutting to the Zord versus Giant Monster footage and they'd be fighting in a big city. So you can infer that Angel Grove's a big city. Angel Grove is a small town. Like if you're a Midwesterner, it's like Salina, Kansas. Or hell, it's a lot like Moline or Smallville. It's a lot like Smallville was in Man of Steel. Just this, though it's a coastal town since Jason's father is a fisherman by trade, so probably someplace more like up in Maine than I think California. Maybe even Alaska. I don't know where they filmed this movie, but I got a little bit of one of those coastal vibes, not a Californian coastal vibe. But it's a small town that gets kind of kerfuggled at the end of the movie, so that's still the same. And there's some, like, if you don't pay attention, you'll miss it, nods to some other seasons, too. I mean, one's fairly obvious, but there's a couple of times where they'll say like the name of a street or the name of a building or the name of a person, and you'll be like, I've heard that before. Only if you've like if you haven't stopped watching after In Space. I mean, I've watched every single episode of Power Rangers, so I know how I can pick up a lot of references. In the end, if you're a fan of Mighty Morphin, and if you can get behind the spirit of this movie despite its flaws, you're gonna have an awesome time. Right when that third act hit, everybody was like cheering. The song was going. Oh man. I'm gonna go see it again tomorrow with some friends, and I just want to watch them the whole time because just how much fun I had at the movie when things were kicking off, and it's genuinely funny. I'll be honest, the first joke of the movie when it gets humorous really falls flat, and that might actually sour people's expectations of the humor throughout the movie. But if you let that one very poor joke go, the rest of the humor in this movie fits with Power Rangers sometimes. Other times it's actually genuinely funny, some of the stuff they say. Is it the Power Rangers movie I would have made? Probably not. I probably would have stuck more to the Mighty Morphin stuff more than this movie does. But for what this movie is doing, and for its homage and its respect that it has towards Power Rangers, I enjoyed it a heck of a lot. Maybe you will too. I'm going to see it again. I'm going to buy it on Blu-ray, and I'm probably going to constantly watch it because I think they nailed it. I hope I didn't spoil too much of it. I think after we do that, I want to do a spoiler recap of this movie just to talk with people about this, because when this movie started, yeah, my jaw hit the floor with what they were doing. So maybe that'll come out soon. We'll see. And you guys have a more phenomenal rest of the week. I hope you go see this movie. I hope we get a sequel so they can flesh out some of the flaws that this movie had. And that's about it. I think I'll see you all next time with more videos. Take care.